So good morning, folks. This is the Kubernetes community meeting for September 1st, 2016. And we have a variety of content for us today as usual. So we're going to kick off with a demo of etcd, as an external controller for the cluster. And that's Hung Chao from CoreOS. So Hung Chao, take it away.
Thank you. Can you see my screen or the slides? Sure.
Yep.
Let's go start. So I'm Hung Chao Dan from CoreOS. I work on the Kubernetes scale mostly, and today I'm going to talk about an etcd controller that we write to manage etcd cluster on top Kubernetes. And in this talk, we are going to split it into 4 phases. First of all, why we build a etcd controller. We need a better and easier way to manage and deploy etcd cluster in a cloud environment. And another question is, why Kubernetes? Why build it on top Kubernetes? Because by using Kubernetes, it enables us to build our controlling logic easily. And Kubernetes handles all those low-level details for us and make us deploy, write the code faster. At the meantime, by building etcd controller, we can share our experience and lessons building stateful applications on top Kubernetes. Like etcd is pretty stateful itself. So here's how it works generally. We build the etcd controller using third-party resource. Initially, we create a third-party resource in Kubernetes, and our controller keep watching any new objects created under that. And when we are create a new, by creating a new etcd cluster, it's just creating a new object. And here we are creating a 3-member etcd cluster. Our controller is going to watch the event, and then it's going to using some Kubernetes API to create to take resources and create a process that's parts in Kubernetes cluster. We can use either vanilla pods or passive API to manage those to make use of the creating process in Kubernetes. And the process will go initially we will have a seed member being created. And then we have a reconciling loop, which we will keep resizing it until we reach to desired state, which is required in the spec we see before. And we are keep adding more and more members until we have we reach the desired state, which is 3-member cluster here. And the controller didn't stop here. It keeps reconciling because there might be partial failure. In here, I'm going to talk about the lose of 1 member. So the process could crash. There's all kinds of failures that could happen. And if 1 member that fail, our controller is going to file some member. Some parts and it's unhealthy, and it's first it's going to use the Kubernetes API to reconcile it, and finally it's going to use the etcd API to remove the member and use the Kubernetes API to create another part, another process, and then use the etcd API to add the member back to existing cluster. And now it gets to the desired state, which is a healthy state of 3-member cluster again. And sometimes we can have more serious failure than partial failure. For example, we can lose 2 or more members at the same time. At that point of time, the controller is going to recover the etcd cluster from the backup, which we have another backup pod that periodically saves the snapshot of the cluster, and we are gonna save that into more stable storage, like persistent volume or S3 or just store like S3. Then we recover the cluster from the snapshot. And of course, we keep building it. There's more features that we want to develop according to our production deployment experience of SCD. For example, we want to implement features of resizing, which we can dynamically resize a cluster from 3 members to 5 members, and maybe from 5 members back to 3 members. And we also security feature, which we want to have TLS enabled cluster. And in SLO feature, we want to guarantee the service of SCD being good. We want to guarantee the service of SCD being good. We want to spread the SCD process across different nodes, and we want to preserve the nodes. And we also we might use a node selector to put SCD process on SSD nodes. Also, that would give SCD cluster better service. And of course, we are also building UI so that people can watch the cluster and manage those things easily. So in the following, I'm gonna give a demo. Okay. So is there any question on the features here?
There does look like there's a quick question.
Quick question, by the way, this looks awesome. I can't wait for the demo. I'm sure there'll be more questions. Perhaps, well, actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to ask 2 questions. One would be perhaps towards the end, could you discuss bootstrapping into a Kubernetes cluster and how that might work? But the thing I was really mostly wanting to ask at this point was, have you looked at using Helm, or do you have an opinion on using Helm for the installation and management here?
No, we haven't looked that far yet.
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing, and I think the Helm folks need to figure out how we're going to create third-party resources as part of charts and that flow. And once that's sorted out, I'd be excited to see that there, see etcd controller there.
Yes, that would be great.
So also, sorry, on the Helm thing, is it just about Helm packaging up the third-party resource and controller? And we still have to have the controller, right?
Yeah, I think you would have a chart that creates the controller, and then if people wanted to make more than one from that controller, they would. It needs thought. It needs thought.
Okay.
The model that I've always thought is that the controller itself should be responsible for creating the third-party resource. And in that context, the Helm chart would simply be responsible for creating the pod that contained the controller, or the replication set that contained the controller, and then the controller in turn is responsible for talking to the API to create the resource that it wants to manage.
Oh, interesting.
The question I have is, if I make something that needs etcd and I make 2 of those things, and do they each use the same? Do they check for an existing etcd, or do they make a new one? And how is the dependency between a thing that needs etcd and the controller Helm chart work?
Yeah, I mean, that's something. I guess Helm needs service dependency management in general, I guess, at some level, if they want to go down that direction.
I had another question. The behavior you described for the etcd controller sounds the same as the behavior for the replication controller. I was wondering why you built a new controller.
They have different requirements. So we can go more details, talk offline, but we are short of time here.
It sounds more like a custom pet set, like a specialized pet set.
Okay, so now I'm gonna give a demo. Let's continue with demo. In the demo, I'm gonna create 3 members class. Then we're gonna do some resizing, and then failure recovery.
And Hangzhou, 4 minutes or so?
4 minutes. Okay. Let me just do it quick. So I'm gonna log into a remote machine, and And now let's see. So now let's take a look at the, now I'm going to create a controller. It's just a part we deploy it on top of our Kubernetes cluster. And then we have a YAML file for the cluster spec, which we create free no member cluster here. And let's see what happened. And we see like it's creating one part, and then like it should keep creating more parts until it reaches to some desired state. Yes. So no. And finally, we reach to like 3 members, and now we can do some resizing by changing the spec from like the size 3 to like size 5. But unfortunately, like the kubectl apply doesn't work for third-party resource right now. It has a bug, so the only thing I can do is I need to log into the master machine and do curl update there. Unfortunately, and here it's the same. I need to change the spec of size to 5. Here now it has a size. Oh, I need to change, remove the backup. Like let's make it simpler. Okay. Now so if you can see here, like it's actually gonna put update on the cluster resource and on the object of SD cluster that we just create. And now let's do it. Get request. Really? What's happening? Oh, I see. Yeah, this one sucks. Yeah. All right, now we see that the size has become 5, and we get it again, like it's increasing more and more parts. And now let's change that again to like resize back to 3. It should work again. Yeah, the spec has been changed. And yeah, it's back to 3. And now we can also like Q1 pop, and it should recover it. Recover the member. And yeah, we kill the part, one part, and we see like this. It creates 5 index 5 parts now, and we can also like go to see the membership inside SD cluster, and we can do in the SD cluster knowledge. It's V2 members, right? And now let's use something else. This one. Right, we saw like it has 3 members, like 2, 5, and 4, which matches the parts knowledge we have here. So it's a little hurry due to the limit of time. But like, so we are also going to KubeCon in November. If you have more interest, we can talk more at that time. And we are also like gonna open source it soon once we implement the initial set of features and finish the documentations. Okay, thank you.
Thanks much, Hang Chao. And it looks like there's a lot of interesting discussion in the chat, so you may want to take a look at that and either answer or ask further questions. Work with the people that are interested there, because it looks like people want to help you.
Yes, that would be great.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we have up next the report about the first meeting of SIG Instrumentation and what SIG Instrumentation is going to be working on. Fabian, are you? I think I saw you is connected.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So we actually just had our second.
Oh, second meeting, right?
Yeah. Basically, which is the second one. And we are sort of in SIG Instrumentation now just sort of showing around like how we can do monitoring. We had the first presentation about that today, and we have already scheduled further ones for the next 2 weeks. So if you're like interested in how can I monitor my Kubernetes cluster and things running on top of it, and just are interested in different approaches, yeah, the SIG meeting is a good place to start. And we also thought about, okay, where can we start making monitoring Kubernetes better? And one of the points we want to address really, really soon is getting more metrics on the cluster state in general. So how many pods are they running? How many restarts did a certain container have? And basically all these details you currently have to fetch from the API and extract manually. And we want to make them accessible really easily for everyone. And so we sort of want to revive the kube state metrics component, which was actually scheduled for retirement. But yeah, I hope we can avoid that and have something on that end really, really soon.
Awesome. Thank you. And I did see your emails about Kube State. So I think that having it have a home and maybe move it back into Incubator and let you guys get some traction under it would be a great solution.
Yeah, it would be great if you could just like revive this thing.
Right. Well, and retired doesn't necessarily mean gone forever. It means unsupported but still archived for the moment. But if you guys are working on it, then it seems a thing that we need to pay attention to. Anybody have questions about what SIG Instrumentation has kicked off to do and where to find them? The answer is Thursday mornings, 9:30 a.m., the Slack channels, email, mailing lists, etc. Awesome. All right. Well, we will continue moving on because we have a really full agenda today. So thank you very much, Fabian. Release 1.4, Philip, I saw you adding notes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. You want to talk about where we are with you as the release czar? Yes,
I'd love to. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about kind of the stuff that's been going on for the past week and then give an update on where we're at generally. So one thing that we kind of discovered is we are going to need to refine our exception policy for feature-free stuff and give more clear guidance in this area. Right now, the wording there's not enough historical cases for us to point to say, to set expectations. And so we need a way of doing that. I'd like to have a better way of communicating like really important release announcements. I know when I send them out to I try to send important stuff to Kubernetes dev. I know that not everyone gets all the information that I send because I receive a lot of questions and people come to me not knowing stuff I've sent to the list. And I expect to have to send time-sensitive announcements like we haven't nailed down when we're going to open up the main master branch for 1.5 work. And so I want to be able to communicate that and make sure it's clear to everyone and half the people, we're not in a situation where half the people are in the know and half the people aren't. So I might start putting really bold subjects like all caps, release announcement, or that sort of thing. And that's my attempt just to make sure everyone is notified. Continuous testing. So the health of the submitted queue blocking test has really improved. There's still a ways to go, but we're making progress. We're doing the right thing. The test flake assignment has been problematic. Flakes haven't been getting assigned consistently to folks who are the correct owners. Sometimes, as we mentioned, sometimes people might be on vacation or something, or for whatever reason, are not going to triage the test flakes. So we need to come up with a new process for this because it's just caused a lot of pain this release. Test priority is also overloaded. So we have this P0 thing, which could mean, we use P0 to mean this is happening a lot and slowing down development. It also means this is like really important to the release and we need to have it fixed. And we need to we need to separate those two decisions and saying this is slowing down development and that's why it's important versus this is potentially really severe and we need to have it fixed before we perform the release. Just a quick update, you can do this search as well, but we have 37 open P0 flakes and 43 open P1 flakes. In the past, we've said that we need to close all the P0 and P1 flakes to cut the release. I plan to cut a release branch today. We can still fast forward that, not opening up the main master to non 1.4 work. This is just to get a dry run through and make sure that all the piping is in place, all the tests are in place, that we can cut a release without any surprises with the branch. Everything looks good and stable. Possibly we're going to open up master tomorrow for pre 1.5 work. This release, I've done something that we haven't done in previous releases. We're trying it out, which is I've received a lot of PRs that are like big refactoring. Not a lot. I've received a number of PRs that are big refactoring PRs that are subject to rebase issues. And for one reason or another, the authors really want to get them in before the pipeline is generally opened up. But they're not really critical for 1.4. They just need to get in as soon as possible. And so I created a separate milestone that on a case-by-case basis, I've been adding stuff to try and give a good compromise in this area. So I plan on opening it up to that first, get all that stuff merged, and then possibly opening up generally Friday, depending on where we're at with flakes, issues, and release branch testing, and just generally how I'm feeling about the stability of the release. I would like to, I really don't want to send the message that everything's looking good, so just focus on 1.5 work and we don't need to focus on 1.4 work. So that would be my main concern with opening up the branch to 1.5 work generally. Something that we need to talk about. Release-specific tests. I cut all the release-specific tests about a week ago, and we've been working through trying to get them all green. There's still a number that are failing, I think about 4. I'm working with individuals who have knowledge in those areas to push those over the line and get them all green. I couldn't find these published in any dashboard, but I think it would be really good for the community to see them and be able to even potentially help address the issues. So I don't know, maybe for a future release we can figure that out. Automated upgrade tests are still broken. We're working on this. Manual upgrade tests are going to be started once the beta is cut. We're putting together a team now of folks that are going to work through this. This is something we want to automate. It's really important that we want to automate it. It's a lot of pain every release. I think one suggestion I'm going to have is a lot of this stuff that we're doing for the release can actually be done at the beginning of the release, and we kind of like leave it till the end. So I'm going to put together a list of suggestions, but one of them would be for next release, if we just do everything we can up front, we're going to be in a better state now. And I'm gonna try and send daily updates on the Kubernetes dev with my release status. I can't promise I'm going to get this done every day, but I'm going to try to just say kind of what's changed that day and how things are improved or how things have anything new we've discovered that is worrisome. Thanks, Eric, for your message. Which are, yeah, something we're trying out for as a compromise and basically to relieve pressure for stuff that I'm receiving a lot of pressure to get in. I don't think should go in, but we can take it up on Slack or whatever. Again, this is something we're trying, and wherever you want to, if you want to put together a forum to discuss it, I'd be happy to attend that.
Awesome. I suggested the mailing lists for things that are more decision. I mean, there's plenty of discussion, but make sure that if we come to some sort of decision, we can reference where we had the discussion and then where we came to a decision so that we don't continually relitigate. So I think it may be worth some conversation, but I agree that we have to try a bunch of stuff to see what sticks for this community. And Philip, your work continues to be awesome in all of this, so thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions before we move on to the next topic for the 1.4 release? There continue to be burned down meetings if you want to attend those as well. All right, on to the next thing then. So Aparna, and I'm going to turn the video so we can see Aparna. Okay, there's Aparna. Aparna is going to give us a market positioning and product vision for Kubernetes for discussion. So this is a deck that covers a bunch of research that she and her team have done, and then gives us a great starting point for what might be opportunities for and pain points for Kubernetes. So have at it, Aparna.
Thank you. Are you able to project the slides, or should I do that?
Oh, hey, I can. Let me find the slides.
I'm going to ping it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
I forget, if I'm running the meeting for the whole room out of here, then I should project the slides. Thank you.
Thanks. So we had put together a summary kind of what the landscape is like in terms of the market for containers and container orchestration. How do we segment that market and think about user needs and the different types of users that may be targets for Kubernetes? So that's what this document attempts to frame, some of our learnings from that process. So we've got in here some sense, a very rough sense of market sizing, a proposal for how we might segment the user base, a little bit of comparison to alternatives to Kubernetes that customers have, and what their pros and cons are from a customer's point of view. And then lastly, it goes into kind of a little bit of what we should work on in Kubernetes to target the different segments and a rough sense of priority. And this is kind of the starting point for obviously discussion with this group, but also a starting point for developing a longer roadmap for the Kubernetes effort. And I hope to do that along with the PM group, over the...
I was going to say, can other people see the slides? Because I am so many levels of inception in this particular video presentation that I'm not sure what
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it. Okay. So then we can see it from here.
I have it.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, you can see it. So we've got customer segments and alternatives, product vision. What slide do you want to be on?
Yeah, this is good.
Perfect.
So that's the overall agenda for today. We're not going to talk about roadmap because we partly developed the roadmap, so it would be an incomplete discussion. But I hope that in some amount of time, we will take this work and develop it into a roadmap, and we'll be able to come back to this team and discuss that. So I really welcome feedback, and I think with that we can go to the next slide. So just to kind of tee up what we're working on and why I think a lot of us are excited about the work that we do here in this community, I believe that this is really the next transformation in compute, and I think a bunch of us have been sort of comparing it to other transformations in compute. So every 8 years it seems like there's a major change, and so these are a list of some of them, and it seems that containers and microservices are the next one. And why do we believe this? There's a bunch of data, obviously, in terms of adoption, but also this was something that I was able to pull together just looking at mindshare. You can sort of see that virtualization, that's the yellow line here, which is VMware ESX is a standard. It kind of went through this peak, and then now it's sort of on a decline. And it sort of maps, at least in my experience, to in 2006 when it took off, in 2010 when it sort of peaked, and then 2014 when OpenStack started to take off. That's really when virtualization seems to have and this is hardware virtualization, seems to have kind of started declining. And then containers, which is the red line represented by Docker, combined with the green line, that really seems to be the next revolution. So, combination of containers and public cloud. And again, it's roughly an 8-year cycle, which is probably due to hardware refresh and software updates. That's kind of how long it takes. And so I was trying to project this forward into how much time do we have as a community to make this change happen. And I think we're at the beginning stages in the first couple of years, and we have another 5 to 6 years. But it's really important to catch that initial phase. And then I was also trying for the team to size the market. So if it is, if it's an 8-year trend and we've got the next 3 or 4 years till it peaks, how big will container adoption and container orchestration be in the next 4 years? And this is a very rough estimate. It'll be difficult actually for me to go into how I calculated this, but roughly based on multiple different analyst reports, 45 to 60% of customers are expected to containerize their workloads in production by 2020, which is 4 years from now. And that's assuming a 30% CAGR. And it could be higher in public clouds. This is an overall figure. So I think if you kind of put the market size for public cloud, I think it's at 40 billion. You could say that roughly half of that could be containers in public clouds and container orchestration, which is a $20 billion market in the next 4 years, which is very substantial. I also was trying to figure out, so what is the desired benefit? What is the reason that people want to use containers and container orchestrators at this time? And there are many different benefits, obviously. Within Google, actually, it's resource utilization. I think that was one of the main drivers. But this survey from Docker that they presented, I think, at DockerCon, I think it's relatively accurate, just based on other surveys as well, that primarily the benefit is that customers are seeing now and targeting now is that of speeding up the software development cycle and having better standardization. And actually, a lot of the reduce OpEx or reduce CapEx stuff is down at the bottom. And so I think that container orchestration has several waves still to play out. And in the initial wave, it's very much about improving developer productivity. In the kind of second wave, I think people will start to realize the portability benefits and will start to use federation and multiple clouds and containers for that. And then I think there's going to be a phase after that, which will involve true resource efficiency. That's where a lot of scheduling sophistication will come in. So that's all the high-level stuff that I have. Then I kind of go into how should we be thinking about this in terms of what are the customers and what are the segments. So I actually used some customer examples to illustrate the segments, or at least one way of looking at the customer segments. So I'm positing that one segment is the segment of smaller companies or startups that actually start in the cloud. They start in a public cloud. And they come to containers as a service from different perspectives. One came from AWS EC2, and they were a VM-based customer. And some of the reasons why they came to GKE in particular is for developer productivity. So they found that when they were in EC2, they had more than 2 levels of load balancing, and they did not trust the autoscaler, so they had less than 10% utilization, and overall their deployment time was measured in hours. And when they came to containers as a service, they actually rewrote their app, and there's a small picture at the bottom, which is probably very hard to see, which shows kind of the re-architecture that they did. They rewrote it with only 1 level of load balancing. And they were able to get a real developer productivity benefit, so that it's less than 10 minutes to fully roll into production, and they can also roll back very quickly. And this is a company that is a public-facing website. That's their main business, and so being able to deploy 30 to 50 times a day is really pretty important in their business. They also found that it was better and easier to troubleshoot because they had fewer levels of load balancing. And lastly, it was less expensive and easier to use. So I think that's definitely one kind of, that's not just one customer. There are many such customers that come from a world of using VMs to containers as a service, and they immediately find these productivity and actually cost benefits. The second segment that I'm positing is at-scale modern apps. And these are the two examples I'm using here are Uber and Box. Uber is obviously not a Kubernetes customer today. They're a Mesos shop. Box is a publicly known Kubernetes user. And so typically in these kinds of environments, there is already an existing footprint. So in the case of Uber, and they've documented this extensively, they used to be an AWS shop. They had a monolithic architecture. They kind of moved to Postgres and, they moved to Thrift and schemaless. They built their own version of MySQL database. And started using Mesos. And they were still, I think until last year, they had just started adopting containers. So this is a very different kind of customer versus the first segment, which is pure cloud native. This segment comes from a kind of a legacy environment, but at the same time, they are a very at scale application. And so, I mean, some of the things that they noticed or they noted as benefits are, again, the developer productivity, but also they found that they had better isolation by using containers. I won't spend that much time on this. I'll go to the next segment. I think the next segment is distinct from the other two. So these are kind of more legacy enterprise customers. There are a variety of these customers. I think we all kind of know a lot of banks are in this situation. They have mostly legacy applications. Some of them developed in-house, some of them are off the shelf. And where they're starting to use Docker and starting to use and think about Kubernetes is in the context of add-on applications. And so these add-on applications are often either tied to legacy hardware, or they're kind of hybrid. They're partly in the cloud and partly in a private cloud. And the requirements that I hear most often from these type of customers are around improving governance and maybe utilizing existing hardware, having kind of much more tie-in to policy and self-service, whatever the internal framework is that they have for policy and self-service. So again, kind of a meaningfully different segment. So if we go to the next slide, here I've just tried to summarize the three segments, and again, just a summary of what the requirements and goals of each segment are. So the startup or emerging segment, again, they are starting in the cloud. They may be coming from a pure VM environment or from a pure PaaS environment, and they're new to containers. I think that the main requirements are, they are looking for lower cost and ease of use, and of course the deployment speed. The modern at-scale segment, they're coming from potentially a colo-owned data center with a bare metal environment, and they may be a SaaS provider. Their requirements are pretty hefty. A lot of them, like Uber, for example, is looking for geolocality, global expansion. They are looking very much for federation and a hybrid type of footprint, where some is on, or majority potentially is on-premise, and some is in different types of clouds, different clouds. They often, particularly when it comes up relative to Mesos, are looking for thousands of nodes of scale, at least proof points of that, and increasingly looking for multi-workload efficiency. So being able to run batch and web and streaming workloads in parallel on the same infrastructure and gain high efficiency, which is not, I don't think, a well-solved problem. Many of them are also, since they're SaaS vendors, looking for multi-tenancies, and often they are very much into the ability to customize. They are actually contributing to the open source project. The last segment, that's the legacy add-ons. So this is, again, they have a lot of legacy apps that are virtualized but may not be right for microservices transformation. The add-ons to those apps are typically what they're bringing and are interested in Docker and Kubernetes for. And I think their requirements, as I mentioned, policy, governance, security, and a mix of some of the things that the modern guys are looking for as well in terms of hybrid. So I'll go to the next slide. So what should be our strategy? If we actually believe that there are these three distinct segments, they have distinct needs, does it make sense for us to target everything? I think ideally we would like to target everything, but how do we prioritize? And I'm positing here that for the first segment, the startup segment, we actually don't need any special features, and that we should focus on the middle segment. And that if we focus on the middle segment, we have the greatest impact, because the startups will grow up and they will become these modern at-scale apps. So we will cover those. The legacy add-on folks we won't cover entirely, but perhaps we can leverage and build up a community of service providers who can support the legacy on-prem ecosystem, particularly as it relates to supporting legacy hardware and/or just providing consulting and professional services support. To the extent that the legacy add-on segment requires federation and hybrid cloud, those needs, of course, we would be covering as we focus on the middle segment. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think I mentioned that the middle segment, there's a big affinity for Mesos. So I'll skip this slide.
We can share the slides afterward too, so people can dig into it a little bit more and continue discussion.
Okay, so then, I'll kind of dig into that a little bit more, kind of what are the features and what are the things that we can focus on to enable that. So the vision here, not rocket science, it's just to make it easy for everyone to use, distributed applications everywhere. I think that's been the vision of Kubernetes from the start. That's the reason why the founders founded this project, is, kind of make this technology and this set of ideas available, and I think this whole community has been working towards this objective. So I then go into each of those areas of importance. So it should be easy to use, and what specifically do we need to do to make it easy to use? And there's already a lot of work going on in the community with 1.4, and I think we plan to continue that in 1.5. We will have a planning session for 1.5 next week. But specifically here, it's very important for people, for users to get a gradual introduction to Kubernetes concepts. I think when you come from the world of virtual machines, you see Docker and you think, okay, well, I want to use a container, but I still want to have control over the node, the virtual machine. That's the thing that I know, and my policies are all based on that. And it's really a step function change for customers when they have to think about, okay, I shouldn't think about the node. I'm just going to think about pods and services. These are all new concepts. And in many cases, customers, are not able to grasp that, or it's too difficult a change for them to make. So I do think that we need a more gradual introduction to Kubernetes concepts. And this is maybe more of a documentation tutorial type of challenge. Another thing is that it should be really quick to start up common applications, because at the end of the day, developer is interested in the application and not so much in the infrastructure and all the coolness that's in the infrastructure. The coolness gets us excited, but not so much for the users. And I think this is some of the work that we're doing with the workloads, and with the Helm folks. Also, our UI right now is fairly poor. And it's not equivalent to the CLI. The CLI itself needs some work. So this is all stuff that, by the way, is coming up. At least I'm going to be proposing it for 1.5. I'll skip some of this in favor of some of the other slides. So easy to adopt. We don't have great examples of support for batch and stateful workloads, and stateful workloads are still alpha, which is really difficult for a lot of people to go onto. So those are some of the major things. Also, one request that comes up very often is dependency management. So I want to start my containers in a certain order. I want my database to be initialized, and then I want my app. And customers want to be able to capture that, and also be able to have the dependencies considered during upgrades. And it's not clear that Kubernetes has. We do have a solution for it. It's not clear that there's an espoused solution for it. And so some of these things are still work to be done for us. Next slide. Multi-cloud. I think this one is really around hybrid and around support in both AWS and on private clouds. And I think one of the things that comes up most often there in customer conversations is, now that I've moved to microservices, I really need better visibility from a monitoring and logging information perspective across clusters for troubleshooting. And that's something that customers still don't really have. So I think that's also something that we should target for a future release.
I'm going to cut you off here. There's lots of awesome stuff in here, including a whole pile of next steps. And I'm going to recommend that for discussion, I promised discussion in the agenda. We're not going to get there because we've got one more item to cover in the next 8 minutes. But for discussion, the Kubernetes PM group is going to be covering this and turning it into more roadmap work. So if people have thoughts, commentary, you can share it with the Kubernetes PM group. And do you know when the next meeting is?
Yeah, it's not next Monday, but the Monday after that.
Okay.
So there's only 2 more slides. I encourage you to read them on your own. I mean, the one before this just talks about upgrades and HA as being the other 2 very important pieces. And I think other than that, I'm actually done.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Fantastic. All right. So we will jump back to next item on the agenda, which was to talk about maintainers and approvers and owners. I believe that Brendan and Brandon started a discussion and we wanted to make that a little bit more broad. So Brandon had proposed, or Brandon's been working on the owners work with CoreOS and his team, and Brendan had some questions. So Brendan, are you still about?
Sure.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say I had questions.
Okay.
There was a PR that came across. I don't have the number on me right off the top of my head.
It's linked.
The net of it was to add 260 people as reviewers, several of whom I know are only sort of very tangentially involved in the Kubernetes process. An example would be Rick Buskins, who did some of the Spinnaker work. So I just kind of wanted to put out to everybody, I think the reviewers are great. I think expanding our reviewing pool is a really important step towards getting better velocity on code going in. But I wanted to have just kind of an open discussion about the process for adding reviewers and what people think about. I guess I'm a little bit leery of opting in people who may only have tangential connections, who are going to suddenly get pinged on GitHub to review code and that sort of thing.
Can we filter that list down to people who've made more than 5 commits to Kubernetes?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's already some degree of filtering, and I would suggest actually that we tried to get, I suspect that there are upwards of 100 people who make weekly contributions, or at least bi-weekly contributions, and that seems like a great number to start with for me. And then have some easy way for people to opt in, either via a form or I don't know what, but some easy way for people to opt in if we want to. But let's just make sure that if we're going to opt in a bunch of people, we're pretty sure that they are. I don't mind Shanghaiing people. My belief is that if you're contributing on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you probably should be reviewing some code too, just out of sort of a sense of community. But I do want to make sure that we target the right set, and so something like that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Should the threshold vary depending on how active that part of the code is?
Well, I was hoping that what we would do is we'd say something like, 2 commits in the last 4 weeks, and then we would target the code areas that that this person has contributed to, looking back further, right? So judge activity versus contributions separately.
Yeah, and there's probably a couple of metrics. We could take this to the issue. So your argument is just filtering down to smaller than 261 to a reasonable number.
Yeah, basically, and Brandon, has code that does this, and so I think it's just a question of extending that code a little bit to cover this stuff. And I should say thank you very much to the CoreOS folks for pushing this forward. It's a very important improvement. So yeah, I think maybe the right thing there is to if anybody who's interested in sort of how we select this or has ideas, let's go to that issue and we'll hash it out there. And then we should also, as part of that, make it super easy for people who are interested, who maybe don't have that history, but do want to start reviewing, to opt in some way.
I think at this point, our conversation and position has been, please review, even if you aren't familiar, and that doesn't mean that you're approving anything, but it is helpful. So we haven't found enough opt-in that way, which is why we were targeting a broader opt-out policy by pinging 200 people. So I think there's lots of I hope not lots of discussion, but I do think we have to come to an answer on this pretty quickly and push owners, approvers, and reviewers out as quickly as possible. None
Yeah,
of this.
I agree. I mean, I think it's perfectly fine if we as a community want to, as part of this, I mean, and maybe this is the right answer and I can do a proposal for this, a proposal PR, but if we wanted to set a policy that is basically like, you know what, if you commit more than 2 PRs a month, you're going to have to review something and we're going to put you on this list no matter what. And that's sort of a community good citizenship thing.
Please put a proposal in for something like that.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, is there broad consensus that seems reasonable to people?
Yeah.
Is Caleb here? Because I think he had something like, he was looking in the last 2 years, right, for the number of commits, and now we're saying, like, look within the last month or something.
Well, so Brendan was being specific about
Amber Alert.
Yeah.
Brendan was specific about saying, Brendan was specific about saying, look at the first people who committed in the last month and then look over a longer history as to where their specialties are.
Actually, so I think I would disagree. I asked for 2 years because most of the people who wrote that code should be either reviewers or approvers. The thing is, a lot of those folks have transitioned to being reviewers, and so recent commits is not a good
metric.
So I'd say it's just the join of people who've contributed to that code in the last 2 years, plus people who are actively contributing to Cube today, and then getting people to opt out of areas they don't want to touch anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern would be I don't want to opt, like, as an example, someone came through and did a bunch of OpenStack code, right? And like, if that was 8 months ago, I don't necessarily want to opt them into being reviewers. Like, if it was I mean, they're a drive-by, and that's kind of crappy at some level, but like, we also shouldn't expect that they should be coming back if they've been inactive for 8 months.
Right. Yeah. Only active people should be reviewers. The set of reviewers should be the people who've contributed to that code over the life of the project.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Yeah, sorry, that makes sense.
And also related, I think amongst the contributor working group, we were talking about something that would kind of ping inactive reviewers or reassign PRs if a reviewer is not going to be involved. So I guess I'm wondering, what's the worst that could happen if we have a reviewer that doesn't commit to it, and we have this kind of pinging system set up?
It rotates.
It'll rotate someone else in.
It's gonna spam people, basically. I mean, that's my concern.
And maybe we can figure out an easy way to automate opting out over time.
Yeah, I would love to get, I mean, we talked about, this is totally separate, but I was talking about some degree of auto LGTM system. And we should perhaps be able to figure out a way to auto LGTM PRs to like a reviewers list that either adds or deletes your GitHub, just like your GitHub ID, something like that.
All right, and on that we have less than a minute left, so I want to say that 1.5 planning is underway, and all of you, I imagine, are thinking about what you want to work on with 1.5, so please start populating the features repo and consider going to the PM meeting a week from Monday. I suspect that this conversation is going to continue with pull request that Brendan put up there, which is 31,752.
Just an incredibly quick thing. I know we're already negative in time. Please do talk to your SIG leads to help identify features and scope it out. That'd be great if you could bring those with SIG approval to next week.
Yep. Thank you. See you all later.
Thank you.